Welcome to the Greening the Desert Project. I'm Brandon, and today we're going to see what's growing on. All right, so we're finally going to reveal how much rain we actually got from that big storm. All right, the final results. How much did we get? Whoa. So if you're new, you actually have missed out on the previous 3 videos of the big rainstorm that we got. Wow. This is the most amount of water we've actually gotten in one storm. Seeing as we've been here now for over 2 years, this storm took the cake on the previous monsoon seasons. 1 inch and 3/10. So a little over 1.25 inches that we got, because especially we got a little extra rain overnight, which was coming down pretty good, but that's super cool to see. So it's actually really exciting to have seen all of our earthworks, how they functioned, all the old earthworks that we've done, but also all of the new earthworks that we've done. So if you actually haven't seen a lot of the new earthworks or the old earthworks that I've done on our landscape, on our property, you actually can look back on our previous videos and look at those and get a way better in-depth look, especially when the water is filling up on those. Speaking of, I gotta fill up on water. What's even more exciting about all of our rainwater harvesting structures and our practices, that after 2 years, we actually are starting to see some actual results here and seeing more things starting to grow, as well as more sprouts starting to come up on our landscape, especially on our southern portion that gets the most sun, but also a lot of the wind and a lot of erosion just from the monsoon. But then we also have found out just the layer of caliche that is pretty prevalent along this whole northern side, to a bunch of different factors that contribute to that, with having a fire in the area, but also with the exposure, then also overgrazing, and then just the snowballing effect that all of these variables had in creating our landscape that we saw in the last previous 2 years. So before I actually even get to showing a lot of what has been growing on, I actually went out the next morning when it was daytime. So the previous video, it was coming all nighttime, hard to see. So now we're daytime and we actually get to observe all of the different basins that I had dug previous. And that's where we're gonna see what basins actually stayed filled overnight and what kind of results we're actually looking at in some of these areas in potentially holding water more permanently, or just observing some of these spots where we're gonna put rubber liner in to definitely hold water in so that we can have more storage and eventually create more shade and roof space over them. So as I'm walking around the property the next morning, just observing all the different earthworks and everything that went through the storm and seeing all the different water holding basins and such like that, it's really cool to actually see our Fraggle Rock area. We did have a couple of these spots holding water overnight, but what was really promising was the main basin that I had kind of previously discussed before the rain event. And this was where I was digging before and just observing the caliche, but also the rock layering. And so it's really promising with this one spot because it ended up actually holding water in that basin, significant water, for at least 3 or 4 days before it finally just drained out. So we're gonna be taking a look at our basins, which this is our Fraggle Rock area, as everyone had voted on. So we've got our multiple basins that we had already dug a while ago, and now just being able to see after the big rain, seeing how we had pooling and sediment deposited, but then at some of these key spots that I was looking at because of all the rocks and the caliche that we run into, this was one of the spots that was of peak interest because of the rock formation. It's kind of under the dirt here, and then bigger rocks here, and then we had caliche that basically made a bowl shape. So there was kind of a good indicator that we might be holding the water in this area for a little bit longer. And that seems to be the case with this. We can kind of see the water line where it was up here. And so now we're on day 2. We're actually going to jump to day 1 just to look at it real quick. So this is 2 days after the big rain dump that we got, and seeing how everything filled, and we still can see we've got water being held in this spot at least. And that's kind of compared to these other basins, because every other basin has actually already emptied beforehand. So it's a really key observation just to look at when we're looking at our area here, and just noticing how much that spot holds the water longer compared to just even 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet away kind of thing. So this is really where all of the rock fracturing down below comes in play, and trying to understand how that fracturing plays into our water soakage. So we actually probably could think and at least make a little hypothesis for this area that we have very, very small fracturing beneath these rocks, which makes it super tight and harder for water to penetrate down. So in a sense, we get a way slower penetration, and a spot that actually almost holds water indefinitely, but we can see that it's obviously draining. So with this, we actually could get a small amount of bentonite clay to actually test out and lay in to see if we actually could hold water for longer. But this is still promising in itself, and we'll widen out the basin itself and kind of see how the rocks are in this area, and then we'll be able to get another sense once we get more rain, just to see how it all interacts, if it drains quicker or if it drains slower. But in either case, this is nice, because if we can hold that water like that, this gives us the potential to be able to pump it out and water other plants or vegetation in the general area. And that's kind of the big thing too with running around the property during the rainstorm and then coming in the next day, just being able to observe just all these different spots, and knowing that we actually do have a lot of good penetration in a lot of our area, but there are some of these spots where we're holding water for at least a number of days. And so potentially with these spots, we could probably get some pure clay or invest in some bentonite clay to be able to stuff into those different little cracks and crevices. And because it already has such a slow drainage, then that means we potentially are looking at less material we have to input to basically make it hold water. I know I was just talking about input, but here's actually a way that you guys can input or contribute and support the Greening the Desert project here. We have our YouTube as well as our Patreon Green Guardian memberships page. We also have our GoFundMe for donations. You can also check out my spreadshirt that has the channel logo and a bunch of other designs that I'm still working on. And definitely don't forget that you can always leave a super chat. I also do permaculture consulting, plot plan mapping, all that stuff. So I really appreciate everyone's support in the Greening the Desert project here. My email is in the description box. So in speaking of holding water, that was the big catch for us, was our rain catchment areas. So we caught a whole lot of water, and I definitely would say that we definitely caught over 1,000 gallons worth of water just from our little catchment area and some of our little basins and such that I do have liners in. Whoo, man, look at all that water. So that was the exciting part, and now when we're coming here to the future, the present time, now we can actually see the amount of water we've used for over a month now, and it's very promising in that respect, just from that rainstorm, the little catchment area we do have, and just the vegetation that we're growing so far. All that water that we did catch has lasted us over a month, and that's not just watering plants, that's also including our livestock, which most people don't know that I am doing the rotational grazing with the goats. And then we also have our chickens on rotation too. So super exciting that we were able to capture all of that water to be able to water the different trees and vegetation that we are growing. So that's kind of where now we can transition to what is growing on around here. Now watch my step. So bear with me, you might not be able to see it quite yet, but we're actually on the southeastern corner of our property here, and this is the area where we have two different swales, but we've also had our goats on rotation, and so they've already passed through this area 2 seasons now. So we've got a lot of different hay scattered, and a lot of manure scattered as well. So we've got a good start to organic material and biology building in this area. But what's really exciting and what is harder to see that we'll get a nice little close-up for is all of the new grass that is actually growing here. So along with the rotational grazing, in a lot of these parts I was throwing cover crop seed and a lot of native grass species in these areas. So this is really cool to actually see after that nice storm, we got a really good germination rate of a lot of our grass seed, and we're actually able to start seeing a whole lot of little seedlings popping up. And what I'm noticing a whole lot more is there's a lot more seed that's coming up in the areas that have the mulch. So all the hay that's piled down and all the seed that's mashed underneath, we've got good moisture retention. And especially after that rain, we definitely had good moisture retention. And not just with the water, the temperature as well cooled down a whole lot. So that gave a whole lot of opportunity for a lot of this seed and a lot of other stuff to actually start growing. So what I actually find too is that we have a whole lot of amaranth starting to grow too. I did have some amaranth in the cover crop mix that I was spreading, but we can also find native amaranth that's growing. And that's super cool. I guess all that wind that we've been getting blowing in a whole lot of seeds. So I think we've got a whole lot of amaranth popping up around here, which is super promising just for our livestock feed in general too. So we've got multiple areas in this southeastern corner of our landscape where we've got a whole lot of grass, new grass growing, but also just a whole lot of different species of vegetation in general compared to the previous few years. And it's really apparent that we do have a significant amount of better growth under a lot of these parts that have leftover hay or straw. So good mulching is definitely key in this area for getting stuff started, but then also for holding and retaining moisture, and then also just catching other seed that's blown around in the wind and organic material. Indian rush peas are what these two plants are. We have an abundance of these that had already sprung up earlier in the season and made a whole lot of seed. And now we can see without my shadow that we are making more Indian rush peas. And yes, they are a legume. These are nitrogen fixing plants, native nitrogen fixing plants, which actually it's more the bacteria that kind of congregate in their root zone that actually contributes to pulling nitrogen out of the atmosphere. So it's not the plant itself, it's more the symbiotic relationship between the plant and the microbes that are in the ground, basically. Yes, it is a common juniper. And look what we can observe underneath the juniper tree itself. Oh, look at all these little seedlings of grass and other things starting to grow. Oh man, look at all that stuff growing. All that grass seed popping up. Let's get the real up close view here. Look at that grass seed. There's some goat manure in there. All that grass seed coming up. That's super cool. Right in the fluff of the tree, but then also in the divot of the swale here. So that's really cool. We've got lots of good, nice grass sprouts coming up. Still holding strong, looking green, and continuing to grow. Try and steady my hand as we look. Here we've got a native species on our property, which this is a 4 o'clock. So we have a lot of these 4 o'clocks that grow and make seed, and we've noticed a lot more growing, and ones that just pop up out of the swale mound like that and like that. So these are really good, even though they're weeds to some people. The fact that these are broadleaf weeds is a really good sign, just the moisture that they're holding and retaining, but also just what they're contributing to helping to break up the soil and contribute nutrients and minerals. So we've wandered over to our terrace swale hybrid that we made earlier in the year as well. And so I've got the video on building all of this. But I had spread the cover crop, and then we had also mulched these areas so that we could definitely hold in the moisture. And looking at last year, how this thing filled up a whole bunch, and compared to this year, now we could see there really wasn't the fill up even with that big storm. And so we got way more water to soak in. And now it's evident with all of that water that's soaked in, all of our cover crops that are coming up and sprouting, and all this green that's starting to pop up. Super cool to see. It's been over a month since we got the big storm, and here we are getting a bit more sprinkles now. We interrupt this rainwater harvesting video to bring you more rainwater harvesting.
The desert